Of those raids overnight now coming back home, and the federal government is expected to push its mining tax through the Senate tonight as Parliament resumes in Canberra.
The government has agreed to publish monthly updates on just how much revenue the mining tax brings in. For more, we're joined now by Liberal Senator Arthur Sinodinos from Canberra. Senator Sinodinos, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, ahead of this vote in the Senate, the Treasurer Wayne Swan has published figures saying that new investment in the mining sector, according to those figures, is scheduled to rise from $47 billion in 2010-11 to $120 billion next financial year. That's hardly the behaviour of mining companies worried about what the Coalition argues is a devastating new tax.
Look, there's been a lot of investment in the pipeline in the mining sector, and there'd be a lot of people there who are hoping that coalition government's elected in the next 18 months and would not proceed with a mining tax. That may well be what they're banking on.
But the mining companies, according to these figures, I mean, there are long and short-term pipelines. They don't seem to be too worried about this tax.
Well, all I can say is if you talk to the small miners, they're very unhappy with the lack of consultation on the Labor's mining tax. It was a deal hatched with the big three miners, and they're saying it'll have a deleterious impact on their operations going forward, and I think that's been documented, and I think it's important we recognise that downside to what Labor are trying to do here.
Is the Coalition still committed to opposing the company tax cuts linked to the mining tax?
Well, I think for consistency's sake, there's no other option. If you say that the funding source is not appropriate, or you don't believe it's, or you believe it's going to cause economic damage, then there's no point linking whatever in isolation may be good things to it if it's otherwise not able to fund those things.
Even though the company tax cuts, albeit a very small company tax cut, it would be warmly welcomed by a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses.
And the Coalition is mindful of that and is drawing up its own plans for company tax cuts, as you'll be aware. But at this stage, there's no detail on that. That'll be released closer to an election. And
just on that point, there seems to be some confusion over the weekend about the outlook for company tax under a Coalition government. Can the Coalition guarantee that company taxes won't rise under a Coalition government?
I can't conceive of circumstances where the Coalition would be raising company taxes.
So that's a no to businesses paying more tax under a Coalition government?
I don't believe they will, no, not at all.
Now, there is also some concern about a difference in views in the Coalition's economic team's message. We have reports over the weekend that Andrew Robb has spoken out against the Coalition's plan to keep that 3% superannuation guarantee charge also linked to the mining tax. Are there differences?
Well, look, given the decision was made on the superannuation guarantee charge, the rise from 9 to 12, I think that's now, as far as I can tell, settled policy within the Coalition. I don't think that will be revisited. I think there are other elements of superannuation that the Coalition are having a close look at, including the default funds that you now find in the industrial relations system, which tend to favour industry super funds. So there's probably more reform to come on the superannuation front, but I think that part of it, for now, Michael, is settled.
Do you agree with that 3% rise?
Look, when we came into government in '96, we inherited a framework for compulsory superannuation, and we agreed to continue with increases which were then in the pipeline. And in effect, what the Coalition have said now is that if this is now passed, they won't be repealing it, because the other problem becomes the disruption that goes with some of these measures possibly being repealed.
Oh, that's a potted history of the super guarantee charge, but I ask the question again, Senator Sinodinos, do you personally agree with keeping that 3% rise under a Coalition government?
Well, now it's policy, I agree with it.
And equally, there are some concerns, there have been concerns about, going back some weeks, about whether a surplus would be reached in the first term of Coalition government. Can you forgive people for looking back and thinking that they may harbour some doubts about the credibility with what the Coalition is talking about if senior figures like Andrew Robb and Joe Hockey are at times offering completely divergent views?
Look, I've no doubt that there's been a bit of untidiness in this area, but I think Tony Abbott has made it quite clear that we would try and get to a budget surplus as soon as possible, and that would certainly be in the first term of a Coalition government. I think some of the prevarication around this has probably reflected the fact that the budget numbers also have tended to move around, and then there's a concern that, well, there's 2 budgets to go, so if you nail your colours to the mast now, what happens if in 2 budgets' time circumstances have changed in a way that getting to a surplus becomes very difficult or is inconsistent with commitments you've made to the electorate?
One big area of, using your word, Senator Sinodinos, untidiness in coalition ranks has been debate over the paid parental leave scheme being put forward by Tony Abbott. Do you agree that's a good policy?
Look, all leaders have signature policies, and what Tony is saying is that he believes that paid parental leave should be a workforce entitlement.
Do you believe it should be a workplace entitlement?
Well, let me give you some history on this. In the run-up to the 2004 election, we as a government looked at the idea of making childcare expenses tax deductible because they were, we thought, a legitimate expense in earning an income. And I think what Tony has raised is this whole question of workforce entitlements around childcare, around leave, how all of that helps to promote work-life balance, how it helps to promote people coming back into the labour force. I think this is the beginning of a debate Australia has to have about the structure of its family payments and how we best try and meet all of those objectives. So, but as I said at the beginning, all leaders are defined by their values and character, and this is one area where I think Tony feels strongly.
Okay, Senator Sinodinos, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks a lot, Michael.